The morning sun cast long shadows across the Colorado mountains when the sky suddenly turned dark. General Jack Morrison stood in the command center deep inside NORAD, watching screens that showed impossible readings. 10,000 alien ships had appeared above Earth in perfect formation, blocking out the light like a massive storm cloud that covered half the planet. Jack had served in 3 wars and seen every kind of enemy the world could produce, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The ships were huge, each one larger than a city block, and they hung in the air without making a sound. Their hulls were black metal that seemed to absorb light, and strange symbols glowed along their sides in colors that hurt to look at. "Sir, we're getting signals from every major city," Lieutenant Karen Bell said from her station. Her voice shook as she read the reports. "London, Tokyo, Moscow, New York, they're all reporting the same thing. The entire fleet just appeared at once." "President." Kate Sullivan's face filled the main screen as she spoke to the world from the White House Situation Room. Her calm voice carried across every television and radio on Earth. "My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, we face a challenge unlike any in human history. An alien force has arrived above our planet. We do not know their intentions, but we will face this together as one people." Dr. Sam Rodriguez watched the president's speech from his lab at the Centers for Disease Control. He had been working on Project Safeguard for 5 years, a secret program designed to protect humanity from biological weapons. Now he wondered if his preparations would be enough against threats from beyond the stars. His hands moved quickly across his computer keyboard as he began implementing protocols that he had hoped would never be needed. Marine Colonel Lisa Hayes gathered her officers in the briefing room at Camp Pendleton. The men and women before her were the best fighters America had produced, veterans of battles across the globe. But as they looked at the tactical displays showing alien ships positioned above every major population center, even these hardened warriors felt a chill of fear. "I won't lie to you," Lisa told her troops. "We don't know what we're facing up there. Our satellites show ships that are beyond anything in our technology. But I know one thing for certain: if they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." Admiral Zexter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Void Render, looking down at the blue and green world below. He had conquered 847 planets for the Kethran Empire, and this one would be no different. The primitive inhabitants had divided themselves into separate nations that fought constant wars with each other. Their weapons were crude chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their armor was thin sheets of metal that wouldn't stop a child's toy from his homeworld. Begin Standard Conquest Protocol, Zexter commanded his bridge crew. "Send the surrender demand. Tell them they have one rotation: to submit or face total destruction." The alien message reached Earth's communication networks within minutes. Every screen on the planet displayed the same text in perfect translation: "Inhabitants of the third planet, you are now subjects of the Kethran Empire. Surrender your weapons, and leaders immediately. Resistance will result in complete annihilation. You have 24 hours to comply." General Morrison read the message and felt something cold settle in his stomach. But then he looked around the command center at the faces of his people. Instead of panic, he saw determination. Instead of fear, he saw anger. These were humans, and humans had never learned how to quit. President Sullivan called an emergency session with leaders from every nation on Earth. The meeting lasted only 20 minutes because everyone agreed on the response. Prime Minister John Wright of Britain spoke for them all when he said, "We didn't survive ice ages, plagues, and 2 world wars just to bow down to bullies from outer space." The reply message was broadcast on every frequency Earth could produce. It was short and simple: "Come and take it." Zexter received the response with amusement. In his experience, Primitive species always made brave sounds before they were properly educated about their place in the galaxy. He had heard similar defiance from the crystal beings of Vortex Prime, the warrior clans of Hemlock 7, and the hive minds of the Centauri cluster. They all learned to kneel eventually. "Prepare the shock troops," he ordered. "Begin planetary assault. Make it swift and brutal. Once they see a few cities burn, the rest will surrender quickly enough." But as the first alien dropships began their descent toward Earth's major cities, something else was happening that Zexter didn't notice. In military bases around the world, soldiers were loading their weapons with grim smiles. In civilian neighborhoods, ordinary people were gathering supplies and making plans. In laboratories and factories, scientists and engineers were working frantically to understand any scrap of alien technology they could observe. The Kethran Empire was about to learn something that no other species in the galaxy had ever taught them, that some creatures become more dangerous when cornered, and humans were the most dangerous of all. The first Kethran dropships slammed into Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they carved through the morning sky. Captain Tony Rodriguez crouched behind the rubble of what used to be a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, watching the alien craft settle onto Michigan Avenue with a sound like thunder. Steam rose from their hulls as they cooled, and then massive doors opened with a hiss of alien air. The creatures that emerged stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like gray leather. They wore armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, and their weapons hummed with energy that made Tony's teeth ache. Their eyes were solid black and showed no emotion as they began to advance down the street, expecting the terror and chaos that had greeted them on hundreds of other worlds. Instead, they found Tony's squad waiting in carefully prepared positions among the broken concrete and twisted metal. When the aliens reached the intersection of State and Madison, Tony gave the signal his grandfather had used in Vietnam and his father had used in Iraq. Light them up. The battle for Chicago began, with human weapons that the Kethrans had dismissed as primitive toys. But bullets are bullets, and when fired by soldiers who have been practicing warfare their entire lives, even crude metal projectiles can find their mark. The lead alien stumbled as rifle rounds sparked off his armor, and for the first time in his military career, he felt something he had never experienced. Doubt. In London, Commander Mary Thompson led her people through the underground tunnels that had sheltered Londoners during the Blitz. The aliens had landed in Trafalgar Square, expecting to capture the heart of the city in one swift stroke. But Mary had spent weeks preparing for this moment, turning every subway station into a fortress and every tunnel into a trap. "Remember what Churchill said," she told her fighters as they prepared for the assault. "We shall never surrender." Today, we proved those weren't just words. The Kethran shock troops found the streets of London empty, but they were not alone. From windows and rooftops, from sewers and basements, humans emerged like ghosts to strike and vanish. Every building became a sniper's nest, every alley a killing ground. The aliens had conquered worlds where entire populations fled before their armies, but these humans seemed to multiply with every casualty. Dr. Alex Bennett worked frantically in his laboratory beneath MIT, studying pieces of alien technology that had been recovered from the first landings. His team had been awake for 36 hours straight, but they were making progress that should have taken months. The alien weapons operated on principles that challenged everything they knew about physics, but humans had always been good at learning from their enemies. "Look at this," Alex said to his assistant as he pointed to the scanner readings. "Their energy source is some kind of quantum battery. If we can figure out how to overload it. He trailed off as an idea formed in his mind, an idea that would change the course of the war. The Kethrans had expected their first day on Earth to be a victory parade. Instead, It became a nightmare of urban warfare that none of their training had prepared them for. In Berlin, Sergeant Klaus Mueller turned the city's ancient architecture into a maze that trapped alien patrols in deadly crossfires. In Tokyo, Captain Yuki Tanaka used the subway system to move her fighters beneath enemy positions, striking where they were least expected. But it was in New York City that the aliens received their biggest shock. The Kethran commander had chosen Times Square as his landing zone, expecting the bright lights and crowds to create maximum panic. Instead, he found Detective Ray O'Brien and 100 NYPD officers waiting with weapons that should have been useless against alien armor. "You picked the wrong city, pal," Ray said as he opened fire with a modified assault rifle loaded with armor-piercing rounds. New Yorkers don't run from anybody. The battle raged through the streets of Manhattan as human creativity met alien technology. Shop owners threw Molotov cocktails from upper floors while construction workers used heavy machinery to create barricades. Even the pigeons seemed angry, diving at alien sensors and disrupting their targeting systems. Admiral Zexter watched the reports from his flagship with growing confusion. His forces were meeting resistance on every continent, but this wasn't the organized military opposition he had expected. These humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Worse, they were learning with every engagement, adapting their tactics faster than his computers could calculate. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving casualty reports from 17 major cities. Our forces are taking losses at rates we've never seen before." Zexter studied the battle feeds with new attention. On his screens, he watched human soldiers continue fighting even when surrounded and outnumbered. He saw civilians picking up fallen weapons and joining battles they had no training for. Most disturbing of all, he saw his own troops beginning to hesitate, their confidence shaken by an enemy that refused to break dot in Moscow. General Alexei Volkov coordinated the defense of Red Square with the same cold determination his ancestors had shown against Napoleon and Hitler. "They want Moscow," he told his troops. "Let them come. We have buried every invader who ever tried to take our city." The pattern was the same across the globe. In Cairo, Colonel Hassan Mahmoud turned the ancient streets into killing grounds. In Sydney, Major Patricia Collins used the harbor to launch surprise attacks from the water. In Mexico City, Captain Eduardo Morales led his people in a defense that honored the memory of every warrior who had ever fought on Mexican soil. As the first day of invasion came to an end, the Kethrans had captured not a single major city. Their shock troops, bred for conquest and trained for victory, found themselves trapped in urban warfare that ground down their numbers and their morale. Every street corner held a sniper, every building concealed a bomb, every shadow might hide a human with a gun and nothing left to lose. Admiral Zexter stood alone on his bridge as the sun set over the blue planet below. For the first time in his long military career, he sent a message to the Kethran High Command that he had never imagined he would need to send: request immediate reinforcements. Enemy resistance exceeds all projections. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion began, and Admiral Zexter found himself facing reports that made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare. His forces controlled the orbital space above Earth and had landed massive armies on every continent, yet somehow the humans were winning battles they should have lost before they started. Sergeant Mike Johnson moved through the Rocky Mountains like a ghost, leading what remained of his unit in attacks that had the Kethran commanders questioning their own sensors. The aliens had destroyed his base, killed half his men, and declared the Colorado wilderness pacified. But Mike and his surviving soldiers had simply melted into the mountains they knew better than any alien could ever learn. "Contact left," whispered Private Jenny Walsh as she spotted a Kethran patrol moving through the pine trees below their position. The aliens walked in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping for human life signs, but they had never learned to fight an enemy that used the land itself as a weapon. Mike smiled as he watched the patrol enter, the kill zone his team had prepared. The Kethrans had superior technology and better weapons, but they had never faced an enemy that treated impossible odds as a personal challenge. When he gave the signal, his soldiers opened fire from positions the aliens couldn't see, using the terrain to make every shot count. The Kethran patrol leader fell first, his 4 arms windmilling as human bullets found the weak points in his armor. His soldiers tried to return fire, but they were shooting at shadows and echoes while death came at them from every direction. Within minutes, the entire patrol was down, and Mike's team had vanished back into the wilderness that had protected human warriors for thousands of years. Dr. Elena Vasquez had not slept for more than 2 hours at a time since the invasion began, but her work was paying off in ways that terrified the aliens. Her laboratory at Los Alamos had become a center for reverse engineering Kethran technology, and every breakthrough brought humanity closer to turning the invaders' own weapons against them. "Look at this," Elena said to her team as she displayed the results of their latest test. "Their bioweapon is designed to trigger fear responses in mammalian brains, but we can modify our own stress hormones to make it backfire, instead of making us afraid, it will make us angry." The Kethrans had used their fear weapons to break the will of entire civilizations, flooding enemy populations with terror so complete that resistance became impossible. But when they deployed the weapons against human cities, something unprecedented happened. The fear lasted for exactly 17 minutes, and then it transformed into rage so pure that Kethran sensors couldn't measure it. In Australia, Ranger Paul Mitchell had spent his entire adult life learning to survive in the outback, where everything from the plants to the weather tried to kill you. When the Kethran landing force arrived in the desert, expecting to find scattered settlements and frightened farmers, they instead found a man who treated their invasion as just another predator to be dealt with. Paul led the aliens deeper into the red heart of Australia, using water holes and landmarks that existed only in his memory. The Kethrans followed with their environmental suits and climate controls, confident that their technology would protect them from anything a primitive world could produce. They had never met a place like the Australian desert, and they had certainly never met anyone like Paul Mitchell. "Come on, then," Paul said to himself as he watched the alien column stretch out across the burning sand. "Let's see how you like my country when she's not being polite." The trap he had prepared took 3 days to spring. Paul led the Kethrans to a valley where the temperature reached 120 degrees in the shade, then disappeared into caves that only he knew existed. The aliens found themselves trapped in a furnace with no way out and no water, their technology failing in conditions that would have killed most Earth creatures, but were just another Tuesday for the Australian outback. Major Steve Parker's defense of Denver had become something that Kethran military historians would study for generations if their species survived long enough to have historians. The aliens had surrounded the city with overwhelming force, cutting off all supply lines and communication. By every tactical calculation, Denver should have surrendered within 48 hours. Instead, Steve turned the entire city into a fortress. Every building became a strong point, every street a killing ground. The Kethrans found themselves fighting for every block, every floor, every room. Worse, the humans seemed to get stronger as the battle went on, fighting with a determination that their alien enemies couldn't understand or counter. "They're not fighting to win," the Kethran ground commander reported to Admiral Zexter. "They're fighting to hurt us as much as possible before they die. It's like they want us to know that conquering them will cost us everything." Dr. Nathan Clark's research into human psychology had taken an unexpected turn when he realized that humanity's greatest weakness might also be their greatest strength. Humans were the only species in the galaxy that seemed to grow more dangerous. When faced with extinction, and Nathan was beginning to understand why. "We're wired for survival at any cost," he explained to his team as they worked on their latest project. "Every other species the Kethrans have conquered gives up when the situation becomes hopeless, but humans don't have a quit button. When? We can't win, we just try to lose as expensively as possible." The weapon Nathan developed wasn't based on alien technology or human engineering. It was based on pure human stubbornness, concentrated and weaponized into something that could break. An alien mind. The first test subject was a captured Kethran officer who had volunteered for interrogation, confident that his superior, mental discipline would protect him from primitive human techniques. After 30 minutes of exposure to weaponized human determination, the alien officer was found in his cell, rocking back and forth and repeating the same phrase over and over. "They will not stop. They will never stop. Why won't they stop?" Commander Janet Wells had been flying fighter jets for 15 years when the aliens arrived, but she had never flown anything like a captured Kethran fighter. The controls were alien, the physics were impossible, and the whole thing should have killed her within seconds of takeoff. Instead, she found herself leading a squadron of human pilots in stolen alien aircraft, turning the Kethrans' own superiority against them. "This is Falcon Leader to all birds," Janet said over the radio as she led her squadron into battle above Washington, D.C. "Remember, we're not trying to win pretty. We're trying to make them hurt." The human pilots flew like they had nothing to lose because they didn't. Every mission was a suicide run, every battle a chance to take more aliens with them when they died. The Kethrans had never faced an enemy that treated their own lives as ammunition to be spent in the most damaging way possible. Admiral Zexter stood on his bridge, staring at reports that challenged everything he had learned about conquest and warfare. His forces still held orbital superiority, his weapons were still more advanced, his soldiers were still genetically superior to humans in every measurable way. But somehow, impossibly, he was losing. The humans had been fighting for 3 weeks, without rest, without hope, without any reasonable chance of victory. By all military logic, they should have collapsed under the weight of their own casualties. Instead, they seemed to be getting stronger, more dangerous, more determined with every passing day. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zexter began to wonder if the Kethran Empire had made a terrible mistake. 6 weeks into the invasion, Admiral Zexter received the impossible news that 3 entire Kethran divisions had been destroyed in what humans called the Battle of Denver. Major Steve Parker had not only held the city but launched counterattacks. That drove alien forces back 50 miles. The human strategy made no sense by any military doctrine the Kethrans knew, but it was working with devastating effectiveness. Colonel Dan Murphy stood in the ruins of what used to be Central Park, planning an operation that would have been considered insane by any sane military mind. The Kethrans had taken 5,000 human prisoners and were using them as shields for their advance on Manhattan. Standard military doctrine said that Murphy should accept the losses and focus on the strategic objective, but Murphy was human, and humans had never learned to accept the unacceptable. "Listen up," Murphy told his assembled forces, a mix of Marines, National Guard, and YPD officers, and civilians who had picked up weapons from fallen soldiers. "Those are our people in there. The aliens think we'll back down to save lives, but they don't understand something about humans. We don't abandon our own, no matter what it costs us." The rescue operation began at dawn with artillery fire that deliberately targeted empty buildings, creating noise and chaos to mask the real assault. Murphy's teams moved through the subway tunnels, using maintenance shafts and forgotten passages to get beneath the Kethran positions. They carried weapons that Dr. Alex Bennett's team had modified with alien technology, turning human determination into firepower that could punch through anything the invaders could field. The Kethrans had positioned their prisoners in Times Square, surrounded by enough firepower to level city blocks. Their commander, war leader Lexmore, was confident that the humans would negotiate for the lives of their captured comrades. He had used this tactic on 47 different worlds, and it had never failed to break enemy resistance. But when Murphy's forces emerged from the underground like an army of ghosts, Lexmore realized he was facing something completely outside his experience. The humans attacked with weapons that shouldn't exist, tactics that defied logic, and a ferocity that seemed to grow stronger when their own lives were at risk. "Take the shot," Murphy ordered Sergeant Lisa Chun, who had positioned herself in a sniper's nest overlooking the square. "All of them, now." What followed would be remembered as the moment when the Kethran Empire learned what humans meant by unacceptable losses. Murphy's forces hit the alien positions from 6 directions at once, using modified human weapons to systematically destroy every Kethran soldier while somehow avoiding their own people. The precision was impossible, the casualties were devastating, and the message was clear: humans would sacrifice everything before they would abandon their own. Dr. Nathan Clark watched the battle feeds from his laboratory, analyzing the psychological impact on the Kethran forces. His research had revealed something terrifying about human nature. They were the only species in the galaxy that became more dangerous when their survival was threatened. Every other race the Kethrans had conquered eventually reached a breaking point where they would accept any terms to avoid extinction. Humans seemed to view extinction as just another enemy to be fought. They're showing classic symptoms of cascade panic disorder, Nathan reported to General Morrison. The Kethran command structure is breaking down because they can't process an enemy that fights harder when losing. Their entire military doctrine is based on rational actors who want to survive. The breakthrough came when Nathan's team successfully tested their psychological weapon on a captured Kethran battalion. The device, which they called the Human Will Projector, flooded alien minds with concentrated human stubbornness and refusal to quit. The test subjects were found 3 hours later, sitting in perfect silence and staring at the walls with expressions of complete defeat. "What happened to them?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, Nathan's research partner. "They experienced what it's like to be human when everything seems hopeless," Nathan replied. "The difference is that we've been dealing with that feeling our entire evolutionary history. They haven't." Commander Janet Wells had spent 2 months learning to fly captured Kethran fighters, and now she led a squadron of human pilots who treated impossible odds as a personal insult. Their latest mission was a direct assault on a Kethran mothership, the kind of operation that should have required an entire fleet but would be attempted by 12 humans in stolen alien aircraft. "Remember," Janet told her pilots as they approached, "their target, we're not trying to destroy that ship. We're trying to make them understand that nowhere is safe from us. When they look at their biggest, strongest vessels, we want them to remember that humans can reach them anywhere." The attack on the mothership was pure human madness translated into military action. Janet's squadron dove through defensive fire that should have killed them instantly, using their smaller stolen fighters to exploit weaknesses in the alien formation. They didn't destroy the massive vessel, but they damaged it enough to send a message that echoed through the entire Kethran fleet. Humans would attack anything, anywhere, regardless of the odds. Ranger Paul Mitchell had been leading Kethran forces through the Australian outback for 8 weeks, and now he was ready to spring the trap he had been preparing since the invasion began. The aliens had followed him deeper into the desert than any off-world species had ever traveled, confident that their environmental suits and advanced technology would protect them from anything Earth could produce. "Come on, you ugly bastards," Paul whispered as he watched the alien columns spread out across the red earth. "Let me show you what my country thinks of tourists who don't ask permission first." The trap was the desert itself, turned into a weapon by someone who understood it better than any alien ever could. Paul had led the Kethrans to a place where the temperature would reach 140 degrees, where underground gas pockets could be ignited by weapons fire, and where the nearest water was 200 miles away. When he triggered the explosions that sealed off their escape routes, the aliens found themselves trapped in a hell that no other world had ever prepared them for. Admiral Zexter stood alone on his command bridge, reading casualty reports that should have been impossible. His forces had superior numbers, better weapons, advanced technology, and complete orbital control. By every measurement that mattered in galactic warfare, the Kethran Empire should have conquered Earth within the first week. Instead, they were losing not just battles or territory, but entire military units that simply disappeared into the human population and were never seen again. His soldiers reported that every human civilian was a potential combatant, every building a potential fortress, every street corner a potential ambush site. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human government. They're offering terms." Zexter activated the message with something that might have been hope, expecting the surrender that every conquered species eventually offered. Instead, he found himself looking at a human military officer whose eyes held something the Admiral had never seen in the gaze of a defeated enemy. "This is General Rick Taylor speaking for the United Earth Defense Force," the human said. "We have terms to offer you. Complete withdrawal from Earth space within 72 hours, or we will consider your fleet a legitimate military target for unrestricted warfare. We have capabilities you haven't seen yet, and frankly, we're getting tired of playing defense." The transmission ended, and Admiral Zexter found himself staring at a blank screen while trying to process what he had just heard. The humans weren't offering surrender. They were demanding it. 4 months after the invasion began, Captain Greg Foster moved through the ruins of Philadelphia like a predator hunting prey that had never learned to be hunted. The Kethrans had declared the city pacified after destroying most of the downtown area, but they had made the mistake of thinking that destroying buildings meant defeating the people who lived in them. Greg's Rangers had spent weeks learning every tunnel, every basement, every hidden passage that connected the underground areas of the city. They had turned the ruins into a maze where humans could move unseen while alien patrols walked into carefully prepared kill zones. The Kethrans controlled the sky and the main streets, but everything else belonged to the ghosts in human form who had decided that their city was worth dying for. "Contact ahead," whispered Corporal Amy Davis as she spotted a Kethran patrol moving through the wreckage of what used to be Independence Hall. The aliens walked in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping for human life signs, but they were looking for an enemy that fought by rules they had never learned. The ambush lasted exactly 43 seconds. Greg's team hit the patrol from 3 directions at once, using modified human weapons that fired alien ammunition they had scavenged from previous battles. The Kethrans tried to call for support, but their communications were jammed by technology that Dr. Alex Bennett's team had reverse engineered from their own equipment. When the shooting stopped, 10 alien soldiers lay dead in the street while the humans had already melted back into the shadows. The patrol had never seen their attackers clearly, never had a chance to fight back, never understood what killed them. It was the same story playing out in every major city on Earth, and the psychological impact on the Kethran forces was becoming critical. Commander Julie Adams coordinated global resistance efforts from a command center that moved every 3 days, staying ahead of alien tracking systems through pure human paranoia and careful planning. Her network included everyone from military officers to pizza delivery drivers, all of them working together to turn Earth into a planet where no alien could ever feel safe. "The pattern is holding worldwide," Julie reported to the assembled cell leaders during their daily briefing. "The Kethrans can take territory, but they can't hold it. Every time they declare an area secure, our people emerge from hiding and make them pay for the assumption." The aliens had superior technology and better weapons, but they had never faced an enemy where every civilian was a potential intelligence agent and every neighborhood was a potential battlefield. Human children brought information about alien movements. Elderly people acted as spotters for sniper teams, and shop owners provided safe houses for resistance fighters who struck and vanished like angry spirits. In Rome, Father Antonio Rossi used the ancient catacombs beneath the city to move resistance fighters from one ambush site to another. The Kethrans had occupied St. Peter's Square, expecting the religious symbolism to break human morale, but they had underestimated what humans would do when someone threatened their sacred places. "They have taken our churches," Antonio told his fighters as they prepared for another night operation. "But they cannot take our faith, and they cannot take our determination to see them gone from our world." The battle for Rome had become a symbol of human resistance that inspired similar uprisings across the globe. In Cairo, rebels used the ancient tunnels beneath the pyramids to launch attacks that left alien patrols dead in the shadow of monuments that had stood for thousands of years. In London, fighters moved through the underground system to strike at targets across the city, appearing and disappearing like the ghosts of every warrior who had ever defended British soil. Sergeant Kyle Brown's unit had been surrounded and outnumbered for 6 weeks, but they continued fighting because no one had bothered to tell them they were supposed to be dead. Their position in the Colorado Rockies had been written off by both sides after a Kethran bombardment that should have killed everything in a 5-mile radius. But Kyle and his people had simply dug deeper and kept shooting. "How many of them are left out there?" asked Private Tim Jackson as he cleaned his rifle in the underground bunker they had carved from solid rock. "More than yesterday, fewer than tomorrow," Kyle replied with a kind of grim humor that had kept human soldiers fighting through every impossible war in history. "Just means we have job security." The Kethrans had stopped sending patrols through Kyle's area after losing an entire company to what their reports described as impossible resistance from eliminated hostile forces. The humans were supposed to be dead, but they kept killing aliens with weapons that shouldn't work and tactics that made no sense. Every engagement cost the Kethrans casualties they couldn't afford, while the humans seemed to multiply despite their losses. Dr. Patricia Williams worked around the clock in her laboratory beneath Mount Rushmore, developing the weapon that would change the course of the war. Her team had spent months studying captured Kethran technology, looking for weaknesses they could exploit with human engineering and creativity. "The quantum resonance frequency is the key," Patricia explained to her assistants as they made final adjustments to the device. "Their entire fleet uses the same harmonic frequency for navigation and communication. If we can generate a pulse that disrupts that frequency..." The weapon Patricia's team created wasn't based on alien technology or human military doctrine. It was based on the simple human understanding that every complex system has a weak point, and if you hit that weak point hard enough, the whole thing comes apart. The Earth's electromagnetic field could be turned into a weapon that would cripple every Kethran ship in orbit, but only if they were willing to risk everything on a single shot. Admiral Zexther had requested reinforcements from the Kethran High Command 17 times, but the responses were always the same: hold position and complete the conquest. The High Command couldn't understand how a primitive world with crude weapons and divided governments could resist the finest military force in the galaxy, so they assumed their admiral was simply being cautious. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, We've lost contact with another patrol in what the humans call New York. That's the 14th unit to disappear this week. Zexther studied the tactical displays that showed Kethran-controlled territory, marked in blue, but the blue areas were like islands in an ocean of red that represented active human resistance. His forces held every major strategic point, but they couldn't move between them without facing attacks that came from everywhere and nowhere. The humans had turned their entire world into a weapon pointed at anyone who tried to conquer it. Every city was a fortress, every forest a hiding place, every mountain a sniper's nest. Worse, they were learning from every engagement, adapting their tactics faster than Kethran computers could track. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," Zexther finally ordered, making the decision that no Kethran commander had ever been forced to make. "If we cannot conquer this world through conventional warfare, we will destroy it from space." But as his weapons officers began charging the fleet's main guns, Admiral Zexther couldn't shake the feeling that the humans had been expecting this moment all along. In 4 months of fighting, they had shown him capabilities that shouldn't exist and determination that defied logic. If they had a plan for orbital bombardment, it would be as impossible and effective as everything else they had done. The war was about to enter its final phase, and for the first time since the invasion began, Admiral Zexther wondered if his fleet would survive the experience. Admiral Zexther stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the final preparations for orbital bombardment that would reduce Earth's major cities to radioactive glass. 5 months of ground warfare had cost him more casualties than the conquest of 50 other worlds combined, and the High Command had finally authorized total destruction of the planet's surface. "All ships report ready for bombardment," his weapons officer announced. "Target coordinates locked on all major population centers. At your command, Admiral." But as Zexther prepared to give the order that would end human resistance forever, something impossible began happening to his fleet. Ships throughout the formation started reporting system failures, navigation errors, and power fluctuations that made no sense according to Kethran engineering principles. Dr. Patricia Williams stood in her laboratory deep beneath Mount Rushmore, her hand hovering over the activation switch for the weapon that would either save humanity or destroy it. Her team had worked for months to turn Earth's own electromagnetic field into a pulse weapon that could cripple alien technology, but they had never tested it at full power. "All stations report ready," her assistant, Dr. Carl Anderson, announced. "The global network is online and synchronized. Every power plant, every radio tower, every satellite dish on the planet is now part of the array." Patricia thought about her daughter in Denver, her parents in Florida, and the billions of humans who were counting on her to do the impossible one more time. Then she pressed the switch and turned Earth itself into a weapon, the electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the planet's surface was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Every piece of technology that humans had built in the past century suddenly became part of a coordinated attack on the alien fleet, generating a wave of energy that overwhelmed Kethran systems designed to resist anything except the focused determination of an entire world. Admiral Zexther watched his command displays flicker and die as the pulse tore through his fleet like lightning through metal. Ships that had conquered galaxies suddenly found themselves powerless, their weapons offline, their engines dead, their life support systems failing. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had turned their own planet into a weapon. "All ships, emergency status report," Zexther ordered, but his communications were dead. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically to restore basic systems while the Jimozamala Admiral realized that the humans had just demonstrated a level of technological innovation that challenged everything the Kethran Empire thought they knew about. Primitive species. Captain Greg Foster emerged from the ruins of Philadelphia, with a hunting rifle and a smile that would have frightened demons. Above him, Kethran ships were falling from the sky like burning meteors, their hulls glowing white-hot as they crashed into the city he had been defending for 5 months. "Time to collect some trophies," Greg said to his rangers as they watched. The nearest crash site. The alien crew would be confused, injured, and separated from their support systems. They would also be facing humans who had spent months learning how to kill them with weapons that barely qualified as advanced technology by galactic standards. The same scene played out across the globe as human resistance fighters emerged from hiding to hunt the scattered remnants of the Kethran invasion force. In London, Commander Mary Thompson led her people through the underground tunnels to strike at alien survivors who had never learned to fight without their technology. In Tokyo, Captain Yuki Tanaka coordinated urban warfare that turned every street corner into an ambush site. General Rick Taylor stood in the Pentagon's war room, coordinating the final phase of the defense that had lasted longer than anyone thought possible. The electromagnetic pulse had worked better than even Dr. Williams had predicted, crippling the entire alien fleet and reducing the invasion force to scattered groups of survivors, who were learning what it meant to be hunted by humans. All units. "This is command," Taylor announced over every frequency that still worked. "The orbital threat has been neutralized. Begin final cleanup operations. Remember, we want prisoners who can deliver a message, but any alien who resists gets the same treatment they've been giving us." The cleanup operations were swift and brutal. The Kethrans had spent 5 months learning to fear human determination, but now they discovered something worse. Human mercy was not the same as human weakness. The resistance fighters who had been hiding in sewers and caves now emerged to hunt aliens, who had never learned to be prey. Admiral Zexther found himself trapped on a world where every shadow might hide a human with a grudge and a weapon. His flagship had crashed in the Colorado Mountains, the same place where Sergeant Mike Johnson had been conducting guerrilla operations for months. The irony was not lost on either of them when they finally met face to face. "You're the one who's been making our lives difficult," Zexther said as he faced the human who had destroyed more Kethran units than any other single fighter. "Just returning the favor," Mike replied as he kept his rifle pointed at the alien's center mass. "You picked the wrong planet to visit without permission." The final surrender came not through negotiation or diplomacy, but through the simple recognition that continued resistance meant certain death. The Kethrans had technology, training, and superior numbers. But the humans had something more important. They were fighting for their home, and they would never stop. General Taylor stood in Times Square, the same place where Colonel Dan Murphy had launched his impossible rescue mission months earlier. Before him, the surviving Kethran commanders waited under heavy guard while human crowds gathered to witness the end of the invasion that had lasted exactly 147 days. "You came to our world expecting easy conquest," Taylor said to Admiral Zexther and the other alien officers. "You thought we would break under pressure, surrender when faced with superior force, accept slavery to avoid destruction. You were wrong about everything." The terms of surrender were simple and final. The surviving Kethrans would be allowed to leave Earth in one ship, carrying a message that would be broadcast across every frequency the galaxy used for communication. The message was short but complete. Earth was inhabited by humans, and humans were not to be conquered. As the last Kethran ship limped away from Earth, its hull scarred by weapons that shouldn't have been able to damage it, Admiral Zexther sent his final report to the High Command. The message was classified as Priority 1 and distributed to every military commander in the Kethran Empire. Avoid Sol System at all costs. Inhabitants designated as apex predator species. Conquest impossible. Survival not guaranteed. But the humans were not finished. As they watched the alien ship disappear into hyperspace, they began preparing for the next phase of their existence. They had learned they were not alone in the universe, and they had learned that other species saw them as prey. It was time to teach the galaxy that humans were nobody's prey, and that anyone who threatened Earth would face consequences that reached across the stars. The invasion was over, but the hunt was just beginning. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, and that place was at the top of the food chain.